Welcome forward with Jesus' Course in Miracles. This is chapter 2, page 18. Any part of the sonship can believe in error or incompleteness if he so elects. However, if he does so, he is believing in the existence of nothingness. The correction of this error is the atonement. We have already briefly spoken about readiness, but there are some additional points which might be helpful here. Readiness is nothing more than the prerequisite for accomplishment. The two should not be confused. As soon as a state of readiness occurs, there is usually some will to accomplish, but this is by no means necessarily undivided. The state does not imply more than a potential for a shift of will. Confidence cannot develop fully until mastery has been accomplished. We have already attempted to correct the fundamental error that fear can be mastered, and have emphasized that only love can be mastered. You have attested only to your readiness. Mastery of love involved a much more complete confidence than either of you have attained. However, the readiness, at least, is an indication that you believe this is possible. This is only the beginning of confidence. In case this be misunderstood to imply that an enormous amount of time will be necessary between readiness and mastery, let me remind you that time and space are under my control. One of the chief ways in which man can correct his miracle confusion is to remember that he did not create himself. He is apt to forget this when he becomes egocentric, and this places him in a position where the belief in magic in some form is virtually inevitable. His will to create was given him by his own Creator, who was expressing the same will in his creation. Since creative ability rests in the mind, everything that man creates is necessarily a matter of will. It also follows that whatever he creates is real in his own sight, but not necessarily in the sight of God. This basic distinction leads us directly into the real meaning of the Last Judgment. The meaning of the Last Judgment. The Last Judgment is one of the greatest threat concepts in man's perception. This is only because he does not understand it. Judgment is not an essential attribute of God. Man brought judgment into being only because of the separation. After the separation, however, there was a place for judgment as one of the many learning devices which had to be built into the overall plan. Just as the separation occurred over many million of years, the Last Judgment will extend over a similarly long period, and perhaps an even longer one. Its length depends, however, on the effectiveness of the present speed-up. We have frequently noted that the miracle is a device for shortening but not abolishing time. If a sufficient number of people become truly miracle-minded quickly, the shortening process can be almost immeasurable. It is essential, however, that these individuals free themselves from fear sooner than would ordinarily be the case, because they must emerge from the conflict if they are to bring peace to other minds. The Last Judgment is generally thought of as a procedure undertaken by God. Actually, it will be undertaken by man with my help. It is a final healing rather than a meting out of punishment. However much man may think that punishment is deserved, punishment is a concept in total opposition to right-mindedness. The aim of the Last Judgment is to restore right-mindedness to man. The Last Judgment might be called a process of right evaluation. It simply means that finally all men will come to understand what is worthy and what is not. After this, their ability to choose can be directly reasonable, or be directed reasonably. Until this distinction is made, however, the vacillations between free and imprisoned will cannot but continue. This first step towards freedom must entail a sort of out of the false from the true. This is a process of division only in the constructive sense, and reflects the true meaning of the apocalypse. Man will ultimately look upon his own creations and will to preserve only what is good, just as God himself looked upon what he had created and knew that it was good. At this point, the will can begin to look with love on its own creation because of the great worthiness. The mind will inevitably disown its miscreations, which, without the mind's belief, will no longer exist. The term Last Judgment is frightening, not only because it has been falsely projected onto God, but also because of the association of last with death. This is an outstanding example of an upside-down perception. Actually, if the meaning of the Last Supper or the Last Judgment is objectively examined, it is quite apparent that it is already the doorway to life. No one who lives in fear is already or really alive. His own last judgment cannot be directed towards himself because he is not his own creation. He can, however, apply it meaningfully and at any time to everything he has created, and retain in his memory only which is good. This is what his right-mindedness cannot but dictate. The purpose of time is solely to give him time to achieve this judgment. It is his own perfect judgment of his own creations. When everything he retains is lovable, there is no reason for fear to remain with him. This is his part in the atonement. Thus ends page 18.